world. Happy Friday. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of our Feminist Friday Happy Hour, where we are bringing together some of our favorite feminist friends, all now members, card-carrying feminists, to talk about their work, their feminist work, and all the different fields that we're working in. And so I'm very excited to have Rebecca Ponticus here with us today, a longtime Mass Now member, board member, leader in our organization, to talk about what her work supporting mothers before COVID and also now during COVID as an employment worker, and even broader than mothers. She does so much amazing things. We're going to hear just a snippet of it today. And then stay tuned afterwards, because in this episode, we also are going to be joined by Anjali and Kalika, the presidents of Now New Jersey and California Now, who are going to talk about the work that they are doing around the country in their states and also together to bring Now members together to take action. So, without further ado, Rebecca, how are you? How's your Friday going?
So far, Friday's been good. It's I'm reading a lot about Tara Reid and getting a little disturbed about that. We can talk about that piece later. But so far, so good. Good Friday. It's Friday. Even in lockdown, Friday's still Friday.
That's true. Well, I would love to start with how did you find Now and become a Mass Now member? And tell us your Now story.
My Now story. So I moved to Boston after law school in 1997. And I had gone to school here at Tufts University, but most of my friends were gone. Some of them were still here. So basically I needed friends. And I needed a place to go, and I wanted to join things, and I wanted to become part of the community. So I just literally looked up Mass Now and Greater Boston Now and was like, okay, what are we doing? And I joined, and I don't remember, I think it was in 98, maybe 99, I became the, what they call it, treasurer of the PAC. And I did that because I was very interested in policy and legislation. And I had also joined through the Women's Bar Association in Massachusetts Legislative Policy Committee. So I really did want to be involved in legislation that had to do with feminism and women's rights. And so I thought it'd be very interesting to be the treasurer of the PAC because I didn't really know what that did. And it was actually a really great way to learn about the political process. We interviewed all the candidates. I interviewed Marjorie Decker long before she went into the Massachusetts legislature. She's now a prominent member of that, and everybody in the state, if you're listening from around the country, you probably don't know her, but if you're listening from Massachusetts, you probably have heard about her. And I met her when she ran for Cambridge City Council. And it was very interesting interviewing her. I got to interview some of the more conservative people who were, believe it or not, looking for the Now endorsement. And I really enjoyed it. And it was a different view of politics. It really informed a lot of how I understood the political process. I mean, I'd been to DC. I was an intern in DC in the latter half of 1992. So right after Anita Hill and that whole incident came up. And so I'd seen the political process from that perspective. But I hadn't ever seen it from the more powerful perspective, which was giving Now's endorsement. And it gave me a really good understanding of how powerful the organization could be. And, the number of people lined up to get our endorsement was really impressive. I mean, I was kind of like, who wants the endorsement of a bunch of radical feminists? I mean, what do they care, right? But they do. They did. And they were really interested, especially especially the state and local offices, because there every vote really does count. And there, if you've got a bunch of progressive people living in your neighborhood, no matter what you think or how you really align with them personally, you have to go talk to them because you need their votes. So it was very instructive in, one, how powerful local politics is, and two, how powerful being on a PAC can be. And I also got to know the laws about campaign finance. So, I'm talking about that a lot because that was really, I did that for I want to say 4 or 5 years. So, I mean, I did it for a long time and it was a lot of work. That was probably my major piece of how the kind of work I did with Now. But even once my career took off, I had too much to do, so I was more focused on being a lawyer. But I've kept my membership, obviously, and there's a lot of us who sort of remember everything back in the day, and so I would encourage anyone who's a member right now who's interested in politics. I think it's a really good way to learn a lot about politics and about the people who run for political office and what it means to be a good candidate, and what you think of people who run. I think you're going to learn a lot from it. So I would encourage people to get involved in that.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like we don't get to talk about the PAC work enough. So for those of you who don't know, Mass Now and Now is a multi-issue and a multi-strategy organization. So that means we have three different arms. We have the Mass Now Inc., which lobbies for feminist legislation. We have the foundation that convenes feminist community because we all need more feminist friends. And then the Mass Now PAC endorse feminist candidates for office and then works to get them elected. And in fact, we can't do any of this work without the other. Like, this is the feminist strategy, is by having all three of these angles. And so if you want to know more about the Mass Now PAC, I'm going to put a plug right now. You can go to our website, massnow.org, and click volunteer, and you can sign up. It's because our PAC is going to be endorsing or going through interviews and then making endorsements also, both on the state level and the federal level. And if you're not in Massachusetts and you're anywhere else in the country, definitely go to National Now's PAC's website also, where you can see the work that we're going to do to flip the Senate. So love the PAC work.
Can I say one other thing about the PAC? Because I think this is important. I know we read a lot about the influence of money in politics. I think I learned a lot more in a very concrete way about what that influence is, because as the treasurer, I had to keep track of the money. And there's a lot of regulation in Massachusetts. It may not be true in other states, and I think it's been relaxed a lot federally, but there is some strict control on accounting for the money, seeing where it comes from, and explaining where it goes. And so having done that myself, I now have a better appreciation on the national level for why relaxing all those controls and things like Citizens United is such a bad idea. Because if you can't keep track of where the money's coming from, you don't know who's influencing politics. If you don't know who's influencing politics, you can't really truly have a discussion about what matters and why. And so I think that it really helps. It helps you understand in a really concrete way what the influence of money is, and helps you understand what, on the national level, what kinds of money level people are facing, and what kind and how hard it is to aggregate all those small donations together. I mean, it's what we want ultimately, but the ceilings on some of these things, it'll blow your mind. I mean,
it's true, and so many people don't, I think, really know the details of campaign finance law, and all of these issues are feminist issues, because if we want a feminist democracy, if we want feminist leaders, then we need to be literally able to elect them, and money is 100% a part of that. And one of my favorite things about you is that you use a feminist lens in all of your work, and law is one of those areas for me that feels really complicated and overwhelming, like finance, that is actually not, so overwhelming. You do a really good job, I think, of breaking down policies to make them accessible for people, and then also helping people use feminist policies, mostly for I think, issues in the workplace as an employment lawyer. But I would love for you to talk about your journey kind of using a feminist lens, perhaps in law school, and then being able to set up your practice where you're able to take the cases you want and ask the questions you want as a feminist.
So I have to start before law school.
Okay. And also, actually, before you start, since I know you're about to say a bunch of gems, to everyone watching right now, every time you like something that Rebecca is saying, like us, comment right now, quote her, share some love, share our video right now while we are live. And you too can ask questions. So think of questions right now and type them in the chat box. We are here to answer them.
So this goes back to 1992. So I spent the fall of 1992 in Washington, D.C. on a special program. And that is probably what really converted me to radical feminism, not just liberal feminism, um, because I went to Washington, D.C., and I was frankly appalled at what I saw. It was the year of the woman. We were supposed to have like all these, it was a whole like 5 people got elected. But anyway, it was the year of the woman, and it was supposed to be this huge watershed. But it didn't feel like it in Washington, D.C. It felt like the most sexist place I'd ever been in my life, actually. I grew up in a very progressive community. I went to Tufts University. Tufts at the time was a little over 50% women. So I was used to kind of being in slightly the majority. And there were fraternities and things at Tufts, but they were a little more marginalized than at like a big state school, for example. And then I went to Washington, D.C. And I started realizing that you couldn't be a mouse about this stuff. You just had to walk out and say, you had to call people on it because they didn't see it and they didn't get it. I went back to Tufts, and I was too late along. I was a junior, so it was too late for me to switch to a women's studies major. I was in political science, but I started taking a lot of women's history classes, and I started really thinking about what I wanted to do as a lawyer, because I hadn't really thought about it other than I wanted to be a cause lawyer. And then I went to law school. Law school is a very tough place, and it's very hard. And if I didn't have a really strong end goal, it would have really been more horrible than it already was. I really decided in law school that I wanted to do something to advance women, something to do with discrimination, something to do with like advancing the rights of women. And I loved my employment law classes. So when I came out of law school, sort of long story short, I tried some other things, but at the end of the day, I really liked employment a lot. And I think it's because in this society, it's really most of what rules our lives. You are what you earn, you are what you do. And if you take that away from someone, especially, like unequal pay or not promoting women, that has repercussions that ripple out all the way to your retirement. And so I really wanted to do something that had to do with that. And I read Joan Williams's work on unbending gender. And I concluded from that, and there are people who debate me on this, but I concluded from that until we equalize caregiving and until we stop discrimination against caregivers in the workplace, we're not going to make it. We're going to be stuck where we are right now, because so much of the discrimination that happens against women now is based on the assumption that they're either going to have children, are going to have to care for someone even if they don't have children, and what they're going to do or should do when they do have children. And there's a flip side to that for men as well. I brought cases on behalf of men who were discriminated against because they were caregivers. And so I think that until we get at that problem, and we're not anywhere close to solving it, we're never going to hit equality. So there's a lot of different pieces to this, but caregivers actually, the wage gap for female caregivers is much larger than the wage gap for women that don't have children versus men who do. The daddy bonus, it's a thing, it's real, it's out there. And frankly, sexism, as we like to say, hurts men too. So men who want to care for aging parents, for wives that are disabled, are discriminated against if they stop acting like breadwinners and start acting a little too much like a girl. So that's what the focus of my practice is, and I call it family responsibility discrimination. So if you Google that, you'll see a lot of stuff written about that. Other people call it caregiver discrimination. What it is it's not a law in itself, but what it means is it's a fact pattern. It's a phenomenon of people who give care are being discriminated against, mostly because the employer is using some sort of a stereotype about how a male or female should act in the face of caregiving responsibilities. For men, it's why aren't you hiring someone to do this for you? Mm-hmm. Some non-white woman to do that for you. And for women, it's, okay, well, yes, you want to be a caregiver, that's great, but you don't get that promotion anymore. We're going to put you in this job, and by the way, pay it less. We don't think you can handle the job because you're too distracted, because you're calling your kids on your lunch break. But those folks that play on Facebook on their cigarette breaks aren't distracted. Okay, fine. It's seriously, it comes down to stuff like that. And so, I have a colleague who had a case where the supervisor at this bank, 3 women got pregnant in his division within like 2 years or something. And he walked around saying to all of them, repeat after me, no more babies. I mean, that's still out there. Um, so I've devoted my practice to bringing lawsuits for that, eradicating that, um, and educating on that, because it's not just children anymore. It's becoming now elder care as well.
Mm-hmm.
So people that are maybe 5, 6 years older than I am have to care for an aging parent who has Alzheimer's, who has Parkinson's, whatever. They're discriminated against as well. And that's equally as likely to hit men. And the evidence on it, which is early, but the evidence is that that's actually viewed much less sympathetically in the workplace than children, than caring for children.
Say that one more time.
Caring for elders tends to be viewed less sympathetically by employers than caring for children. There's, I think, a bigger assumption that you are going to hire someone to deal with this for you.
Mm-hmm.
So although that's less and less affordable for anybody who makes anything, close to the average income. So anyway, so that's the long-winded explanation of what I do.
I'm so glad you told that story, because I would have thought about it from the other side. Like there's paid family medical leave policies that we're working on, or pregnant worker accommodations policies. But you told it from the beginning, which is the value of childcare. But it's actually not just childcare. It's care work, which is the whole spectrum of just gendered work that we don't value. That's what we were talking about in our pregame before.
Yeah. No, we don't.
And we were just talking about that last week on our Feminist Friday discussion about childcare. And I would love to hear your thoughts both on the progress that has there been progress since 1992, for example, that you see, and what have been some of the best policies that have passed that you are excited to use, and that we should all know about, in terms of, and also, I guess I'm thinking about that as we're in a pandemic, and I'm hoping that we can use this moment to, as a culture, as a society, really bring home the fact that we need to change our entire labor system and economy to value care work, which has always been happening. And so, yeah, where are we in this moment?
Okay, so let me start this way. The first thing to remember for everybody when we're thinking about policy is that these things are all interrelated. Equal pay is related to discrimination at work against caregivers. Socialized childcare, universal childcare, whatever you want to call it, that is inextricably linked to what's happening in the workplace, because we put so much of this social, what I think is very social type of work, on individual families to deal with, and it's actually a structural problem. We do need more paid leave, but that's not going to solve the situation by itself. There's a really, really interesting study by Michelle Buj. I always get her last name wrong. She's at UMass Amherst, but she studies these things. And she did a study on equal pay and paid leave. And what she found was that women in the workplace have the smallest pay gap when they have 1 year of paid leave. She did an international study on this. So it's very, very interesting. So to me, that says, okay, we guarantee 1 year of paid leave, and then women will stop, facing so many roadblocks and will be paid. But I think it's important to look at these things as a whole picture. The Roe Act is inextricably linked to what your status in the workplace is going to be. So you can't put these things, and the way I learned it was they're all in buckets. There's the reproductive rights bucket, there's the sex discrimination bucket, there's the equal pay bucket. Wrong. They're all linked together. Now, so with respect to progress, the answer is yes, we have, and it's also no, we haven't. So after 1992, the Family Medical Leave Act was 1993. That was a big deal at the time, but that was 25 years ago or 30 years ago, whatever it is now, and it's completely and utterly inadequate. We have a two-tiered system in this country. If you're going to get any sort of paid benefits at all, you're a white-collar worker probably making a lot of money. You're going to get practically zero if you're in a service job making minimum wage. So in some senses, the COVID-19 measures like the CARES Act that don't apply to people with 500 employees are leaving out a large range of workers, mostly workers of color, who don't really have access to this stuff anyway. So you have to also remember that these issues are the same across the spectrum. You're going to be discriminated against if you're a VP in probably somewhat the same manner and for the same reasons that you might be discriminated against if you are in a service job. But what it's going to take to help people on those ends of the spectrum are very different. So when you're thinking about policy, you have to think about it as a spectrum of who you're going to be helping. And I've become convinced over the course of my career that helping certain segments of people, only people who make less than this income, or only people, all that does is pit everyone against each other. And that's not helpful. Because really everybody has a lot more in common than you might originally think. I mean, I hate to tell the lawyers out there this, but you have more in common with the person sweeping the floor in terms of your legal rights as an employee than you do with the partner at the law firm. But we're not sold it that way. We're sold it very differently. So yeah, we've made progress. And companies have been voluntarily putting in a lot of benefits and paid leave plans, and that's great. And I think that there's been some incremental progress on this. But largely because we have a very privatized capitalist system, that progress has been slow, it's incremental, and it really depends on your education level. And I don't think it should depend on any of that. So it's, I mean, at least we've now got people talking about paid leave. But I took a deposition 1.5 years ago when I asked every deponent if they knew what associational discrimination was, and nobody did. And in case any of you who are listening don't know what it is, the Americans with Disabilities Act and Massachusetts law prohibit discrimination against you if you have a disabled parent or a disabled child. So it's called associational discrimination. It also applies if you're in an interracial marriage, for example. If you're a white person and you're married to somebody of color and you're being discriminated against because you're married to that person of color, that's illegal. That can't happen. That's not allowed.
Association. I'm following.
Association discrimination.
I didn't know that.
It's a big issue for caregivers, frankly. If your parent has Alzheimer's disease and you're being discriminated against because they know at work that you're caring for this person, that could be illegal. They can't, penalize you at work by writing you up or firing you because they are making assumptions about your abilities based on how much time you have because you're caring for someone. Same thing if you have a special needs child. Same thing if you have a problematic pregnancy. They can't, it's illegal to discriminate. They don't have to accommodate you, so they don't have to give you a special schedule. But if they give special schedules to other people for other reasons, but they don't give it to you, that could be discrimination. So, yeah.
So interesting. Well, this is, I think, a really great overview of the landscape of what feminist employment law looks like. And I will encourage everyone to go to Rebecca's website. We'll put it in the chat box in a bit. I see a question from Kim in Newton. Hi, Kim. How are you? About asking if that was a Massachusetts or a federal law that you were just talking about.
Both. It's both. Not all states have it, but Massachusetts does. It's also in the federal law.
I also want to give a shout out to the Roe Act, which you mentioned, which is one of Mass Now's priority bills that would increase access to abortion specifically for young people, because you shouldn't need your parents' consent in order to choose what will happen to your body, because you didn't need their consent to get pregnant in the first place. For example,
legally allowed to give it at age 16.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying.
And there's like so many more conversations around consent law and all of this. So you should take a look at Mass Now's multi-issue intersectional feminist agenda. To read more about the Roe Act and consent and all that good stuff on our website, massnow.org. And stay tuned for more conversations around childcare and supporting caregivers in general with Mass Now. But I want to thank Rebecca so much for joining us today. This will not be the end of you seeing Rebecca. We'll be bringing her back in other fashions throughout the year. I hope to keep talking. But I really appreciate you taking the time out of your Friday.
This has been great. It's been a really fun conversation, and it's awesome to reconnect with Mass Now again. Everybody, thanks for listening, and have a great weekend.
Yay! All right, so next I will be bringing along two friends that I have been working with. Let's see if I can bring them on right now. Welcome, Anjali and Kolika. Oh, hi, I can hear you. Great. So Anjali is the president of New Jersey now, and Kolika is the president of California now. And we have been working for 2 months now since the pandemic started, or since we realized that the pandemic was happening, in weekly calls. So a bunch of now presidents from around the country have been meeting weekly to just check in and organize. And I know that we all have been really enjoying getting to know each other on a personal level over the last 2 months, but also are, I think, perhaps even more excited about what is possible now that we are able to organize together and share more resources about policies that we're working on the state level and the federal level. But before we get into that good stuff, let's start with introductions. And I would love to hear your Now story, how you found Now, or how Now found you, and a little bit about your chapter. So let's go with Anjali and then Kalika, because you're in that order on my screen.
Hi, Sasha. Hi, Kalika, and anybody else who's watching. As Sasha mentioned, I am joining you from New Jersey. And it's really interesting when you ask about my Now story. I always like to say that I was a feminist before I knew what that word was or what it meant. But I think for that reason, I think my feminist story just started, and even my Now story, in 2016. In October 2016, I was visiting London, and I met a friend of mine who is now a celebrity chef. She was just actually nominated for a James Beard nomination, Asma Khan. And in the conversation with her, one of the things that Asma has become really well known for is how she uses her platform to speak out about immigrant rights, workers' rights, refugees, and all kinds of feminist issues. But probably the most famous thing that she talks about is how in her restaurant, she has an all-female kitchen. So she's very proud of that. But in that lunch that we were having, she said something that really sort of changed my perspective on a lot of things. And we were just conversation, in the middle of the conversation, she just dropped something and she said, all the women in my kitchen, including myself, are second daughters. And for a second, I was like, what do you mean? I'd never heard that term before. So Asma and I grew up together. We went to the same school, from middle school onwards to high school. And actually her sister was in my grade. So her sister was the older of the two, and Asma was the second daughter, as she put it. So when she said that and she explained it to me, it was as if my whole life came into focus. And the reason I say that is because I'm a second daughter too. And what that means in India, in a country that women not only have no value, but sons are exceptionally prized. So when the first child is born and it's a girl, there's disappointment, but there's next time we'll have a boy. It's no big deal. It's fine, right? They get over it. But when the second daughter is born, and in my case, my parents had no other after me, it really is like disaster or tragedy has fallen. And all my life growing up, I never really understood that even in the same home, why I was treated differently from my sister or my cousin, who we lived in what in India is called a joint family. So my uncle's family actually lived with us. And I never really understood why I felt like I was treated differently. And when Asma said that, like it was kind of like everything just clicked into place. And so growing up in a society where, for everything that I wanted, in terms of opportunity, in terms of education, in terms of having a career, I truly had to use my voice and fight for it. Like no one was going to hand anything to me. So I think that's where my feminism actually started. And then my now story also goes to 2016 because I actually worked on the Clinton race. So I was working in Pennsylvania in a very, very red county. So that was difficult. And on the night of the election, I was actually at the Jacob Javits Center, waiting with all the supporters for the results. And it was really disappointing. I know the mood in there, I can't even describe it. At one point, I just turned to my husband and said, I can't take it anymore. Let's go home. And this was before anything had been announced. But it was just like, you could tell, like, it was not going to be good. And for months after that, I would not turn on the TV. I truly was in mourning. I ended up going to India for vacation in January. And right before I went, I bumped into a friend of mine while I was out running errands. And my friend knew that I had worked on the Clinton campaign, so she asked me how I was doing. And she said, like, yeah, I know what you mean. And then she said that I'm going to call you. And I was like, okay. So when I came back from India, it was the end of January, and she called me up and she said, I'm going to run for Congress. Will you be on my campaign? And a lot of my now story actually started from that. My actual activism in New Jersey, my joining a chapter and becoming president came about actually because of my friend running for Congress. But also that year, even before my friend said anything about now, in March of that year, in 2017, was my birthday. And coming out of the 2016 election, I was like, what do I want for my birthday? And I was like, I don't really need anything. I think I'm just going to join a couple of women's organizations and donate to them. And that was one of them. And the ride through 2017, 2018, 2019, it's been incredible. As I said, I worked on my friend's congressional campaign. That year, I also worked on an assembly campaign. In 2018, I ran for office. And then at the end of 2018, I actually was elected to the role that I am in now, which is as state president for New Jersey. So that's my now story. And the last year in this role has been so fulfilling. It has, as hard as I have worked and as hard as everything that I have put in, I have to tell you, like, what I've gotten back has been way more.
I love that. I didn't even know that story, so I'm learning. Yeah.
Always learning a lot. Well, hi, everybody, and all of those who are tuning in with us. Hi, Sasha. Hi, Angelique. Very, very powerful. I wanted to say thank you for having us on this Friday. Thank you for all the work that you guys are doing in your respective states. Before I get a little bit to my now story, I'd be amiss not to talk about the most important issue of today. So I have to interrupt our regular scheduled programming to talk about Ahmaud Berry. This will be one more Mother's Day, one more, that a Black child is separated from his mother. And I hope that each and every one of you got your 2.23 miles in today to finish off the run that Ahmaud was doing. Racial justice is one of the 6 core issues of now, one that we take very, very seriously in California, and one that I really wanted to spotlight and bring forth that may kind of get lost in a multi-issue organization, but really should be the focus. So I wanted to remind people of just a couple things this afternoon today, is that these instances of racial injustice, with Black lives being lost to white supremacy, and the death and just the pain and horror that our communities are experiencing, are also reproductive justice issues. They are important and they require our focus. And it's important to me to remind those with privilege that getting your run in is not enough. I'm sorry. I had to be the bearer of bad news. But to get out there and to donate and contribute your time to fighting systemic injustice, to get out there and contribute and join organizations like some of the chapters in now that are very intersectional and really keep true and speak true to power, to get out there and join and figure out why it's so important to allies in the movement, to stand for justice, and to be there in support of Black lives. I also want to remind the folks that are celebrating because we finally have gotten 2 arrests. George Zimmerman was also arrested. So arrests are not enough. This is not the end. We can't tune back into our regular schedule programming until we get justice. And to remind folks that the 4th tenet of reproductive justice is to be able to parent our children in safe communities. So this is an epic failure for reproductive justice tonight. And I just had to use this very privileged and time and platform to speak out, because it isn't about us. It really, really is about the work. And I guess it ties right into my now story. I've always been a feminist. In some ways, to exist is radical as a Black woman in America. So I've always been a feminist, and I learned about now and the long storied history back at Berkeley when I was a student, and I was in love with some of the programming and really entered through the lens of Love Your Body Day and Take Back the Night. So I really was involved in the domestic violence programs. I was also had an internship through our Gender Equity Center and some other things. So all of the issues really connected and moved through now as a platform. So I really, really, even though I was always a feminist, garnered the language. It gave me the language, the tools, the keys, the organizing ability. It really, really, really taught me that it wasn't enough to just to speak truth to power, but there was a strategic process to this. And that is one thing that I will thank now for is teaching me how to lobby, how to do these things. And it's something that I had stuck with. I really have to thank the Feminist and the great mentorship, the mentors out of California, and then just the Black mothers of the movement who have taught us so much. And I also want to give a great shout out to the womanist leaders that have been doing their thing for as long as they can remember, who are the first and true feminists. So that really was my story with now. And then I was able to move up through leadership, moving back to Sacramento, joining the now state board, and then becoming its president. So we have a lot of work to do in California and beyond, but that's my now story. And that's all I have for right now.
I love it. I mean, thank you so much for, first of all, starting with the urgent action alert around supporting Ahmaud's family and the Black Lives Matter cause, anti-gun violence cause, anti-police brutality cause. All of these things that are intersectional and have been happening, and we all need to be sharing about them on our personal Facebook page and organizational pages if we haven't already, ongoing, because today is not the only day. So yes, wanted to say that again, up in front and center. I also love that you found Now as a college student, because I think we have a lot of really awesome young people in Now. We have a young feminist task force at Now. If you didn't know, Kalika and I are both a part of it. Young is 35 years and younger, I believe, officially, according to our National Now Task Force. And one of my favorite things about Now is that we are intergenerational. I found Now when I graduated college because I was looking for that feminist community after college. And I realized that even though I could talk a lot about feminism very passionately, I couldn't turn that into words especially in terms of talking about policy on the local or statewide level. It wasn't relevant to me, which is not my fault. The system was not made to be relevant to me. But through Now, I love that you said, Kalika, that we've been able to learn strategy to get in there and propose feminist policies. So I see some folks talking about local stuff happening in Newton, for example. I would love for you both to talk about the different work that your state and local chapters do, because you both have really active local chapters. Mass Now has 3 local chapters. We have Worcester Now, Lowell Now, and South Shore Now, and are hoping to start one in Newton too. But yeah, tell me, maybe let's do Kalika first this time, and then Anjali.
Hi, and thank you, Kim Gallagher, there for shouting out racial justice. Awesome in Newton, Massachusetts. I haven't been to Newton, but I have been to Boston quite a few times. We have a full agenda. This is all now moving virtual for the rest of the year due to COVID-19. So currently, there's a lot of really organizing going around in the nation still around COVID-19. So we've signed on to a ton of coalitions and letters to demand more so that women get their fair share during the COVID-19, but also to help, this ties into our work on mass incarceration, going back to racial justice, to try to alleviate most of the incarcerated populations that are over the age limit and folks that have had misdemeanors from jails. That has been pretty much the bulk of my work since this had started. And I think that it's important to always center and speak out for the most marginalized. And they're literally housed in cages. And again, just more of the separation of families, even in a global pandemic. There's always the legislative side. The Capitol was closed for a good amount of time, but it reopened May 4th here in California. In the chapters across the state of California, from Northern California to Contra Costa to the Bay Area, all the way down to Califia chapters. So in California, we have women of color chapters that are Califia chapters. So we have a Califia chapter in Los Angeles. We have a Califia chapter in San Diego. And we'd like to get some all Spanish speaking chapters as well. Then our chapters in Hollywood, our chapters down in another chapter in San Diego, San Gabriel Valley, to shout out all the great work they were doing. And I think that they are also moving towards online platforms, but they do a lot of work around reproductive justice and also are intersectional, I would say, in their programming. I love the work that they do around consciousness raising, as I know you guys do a lot of in Massachusetts. So that's awesome. I'll tell you a little bit about what's on the agenda. In light of COVID-19, we have some California Now support groups coming up, existing, resisting, persisting. So we understand that a lot of people are not ready to go, to get into the fight in light of this horrible disease just yet. So on May 30th, to remind folks that it's good to just exist. The fact that we made it is fine, and to really talk about what we've gained and kind of what we lost, to have that space. And that's going to be led by the amazing Jen Carson of the Women's March in California. And resisting June 7th and persisting June 14th. And really talking about keeping the good goal in mind, which is to get this man out of office in November, and that we're staying focused and persisting to the finish line. We want to remind you that every woman counted, and we want every woman registered so that we are still registered folks to vote, and we still want you to complete the census. Those are much needed resources that need to get back to our communities. We will be having co-sponsoring a Women Who Win on May 9th, and those are highlighting the candidates for the special election May 12th here in California. So it's always a lot, I guess you'd say, on the agenda, and we will be finishing up the rest of our virtual boot camp, and that's for already now members, not to the world at large, but feel free to join, about vetting intersectional candidates. We're organizing your digital chapter, and then going more into the organizing around Every Woman Registered, Every Woman Counted on consecutive weeks in May. So I think that's all I have right now. That's all I have right now. Go ahead, Anjali.
So the last few years in New Jersey have been really, really interesting. We have active chapters that have been active in New Jersey since the 1970s. We have members, active members, who have been members since then too. But after the 2016 election, I have to tell you, like, the women of New Jersey, hats off to them, because in New Jersey is a gerrymandered state, but gerrymandered to it was like bipartisan gerrymandering. So we have 12 districts, congressional districts, and they basically decided to split it between themselves. And 6 were basically gerrymandered to be Democratic, 6 Republican. In 2016, we flipped one of those. So we were 7 and 5. And after the 2016 election, the energy that we saw, without a doubt, it was the women in New Jersey. We flipped 4 more. So we were 11-1 in New Jersey. We have since then 10-2, unfortunately, because we had somebody switch parties. Crazy as it is, but we are all out working to get rid of that guy now. So our chapters do a multitude of tasks, grassroots work from, actually community organizing in terms of like supporting our independent abortion clinics. We have people who do volunteers as escorts, to actually working on getting these feminist candidates elected, the ones who really care about their issues. So we have very active chapters who have worked on like Andy Kim's election and Tom Malinowski and Mikey Shrettle. Those are sort of like our stars in New Jersey. 2017 was even more interesting for us because we finally got a progressive Democratic governor. So we had a legislature that was a Democratic legislature, both houses, for many years, but 8 years of Chris Christie were not good for New Jersey. And having had, Governor Murphy in office now for a little over 2 years, the journey has been unbelievable. When you look at the number of progressive bills that we have passed in New Jersey, all the things that we've been talking about on this hour, I was listening to Rebecca before, talking about care and, family leave and paid sick leave. New Jersey passed one of the most comprehensive paid leave bills in the country. And in our bill, when you define family, family is anyone you call family. So it could be your neighbor, it could be your friend, it's anyone you call family. And at this point, under COVID-19, we're actually working not only to make sure that that's implemented, enforced, that the workers who need it the most generally don't even know that it's there. So we're trying to get the message out. But at the same time, we're also trying to get it extended so it covers more people and gives them more benefits. We passed equal pay. We passed $15 minimum wage. I actually had to write the list because there was just so many. We did things that were like, we actually passed a bill last year that will now allow issuance of driver's licenses for undocumented people in New Jersey, and we have a significant undocumented community. We are now working on bills that are equally important. We are actually looking to codify Roe v. Wade. We are looking to provide period products in public schools. I know that's very dear to Massachusetts now, and Sasha.
Yeah.
We're working on ballot reform.
Mass Now member is working on that. He's gone home, right? So shout out to Lindsay and New Jersey.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So those three bills are where we are sort of like the primary driving force, or part of a coalition that is the driving force. Some of the other bills that we have worked with coalitions to pass, the incarcerated dignity bill, where we passed a bill last year and it was primarily for women because it was a primary caretaker dignity act for our incarcerated women. We passed a maternal health bill in New Jersey, which prides itself on being, we are the second wealthiest state in the nation, I believe. And we have one of the worst maternal health records. And of course, that, no surprise to anyone, is, sort of tips towards, people of color, women of color. So our First Lady actually put together a task force to work on a whole set of maternal health bills. We did things like doula services and things like that would actually make a difference, not just in the sort of the pre-pregnancy and the delivery, but things that will provide services for up to a year after the pregnancy. Because we realize that there's a lot of, especially in communities of color, and where we have and when we have like teenage mothers, that's where the care is really needed, and the support and the services are needed. So we're really, really happy that we finally have a progressive governor. We have a progressive legislature, and the people in New Jersey, it's the way they have risen to the occasion has been unbelievable. So you can imagine the excitement on 2020, and everyone is a little frustrated with the COVID-19 crisis because everybody wants to be out there campaigning, knocking on doors. I had friends who had already made plans to move to Wisconsin for a month, or Pennsylvania for a month, like wherever we need to be in order to get that man out. So we're waiting to see what happens. We're really excited about now in New Jersey. We have a state conference this year. And we're just waiting to see what this crisis brings too. So, yeah.
Yes to all of that.
Yeah.
I see a question from someone. It's for California, but I think can be thought of broadly too. She said, first of all, that it's lit in California. Yeah, it's lit in California. I know you also, full disclosure, I got to meet Kalika in Sacramento earlier this year in November, which was pretty cool, but I didn't get to meet her board. And you have like an all women of color led board that doesn't go without saying. So very cool.
Yeah. And Georgia. Now we have another one in Georgia. They have all women of color board in Georgia.
That's awesome too. Shout out to Tiana in Georgia, who led a really awesome Denim Day activism with Kalika last week. It was just last week, right?
April 29th.
Yeah. What are the days? It's Friday. Okay. So Sam asked, do you find that the various groups work well in coalition, or that the work in a state so large is fractured? And I want to just take that to, I think more broadly, because one of the things I love about now is that we are a grassroots, member-led, chapter organization. And so we have state-level chapters, we have local chapters, and we have the national organization, and we are working on these issues on all levels of government in the multi-strategy way. But it can be hard, literally, to get around the country. Like, before the pandemic, I was taking the train all around, the commuter rail all around Massachusetts, which I love. Or I would have some very generous people drive me all around the Commonwealth, to New Bedford, to Worcester, to Lowell, which was great to meet people where they are, because people aren't coming to Boston or Sacramento, or the capital, Princeton of New Jersey, to to do, on the regular. So how can I think the question is also like, how do we as now engage our chapters on the local level, and also perhaps we're doing this now even more so with technology, even more so as in we're connecting more, and we're connecting more broadly, like multiple states in ways that we haven't before, as now. Maybe we can go Anjali and then Kalika this time. I don't know if you have.
Go ahead.
So one of the things that I like about the way we have been working in New Jersey is a lot through coalitions. For almost every major bill that gets passed in New Jersey, there's a coalition behind it. And coalition partners are any sort of stakeholders, So for example, we will even reach out to like the faith-based communities. So for example, as we're working on our abortion bill right now, we actually have an interfaith-based subcommittee that is working with us. And so it's really important. And, you have sort of the, as they call it, the usual suspects, right? So like the Planned Parenthoods and the ACLUs and all of those. But we will also reach out to like the smaller organizations that may be more state-based or local-based. If there's, a stake in that, if we feel like this is an organization that will have a stake, we are always reaching out for more. And we're trying to be very creative in that too. So for example, when we have a period product bill, like we're reaching out to the Teachers Association. The Teachers Union in New Jersey is very powerful. So trying to really be creative and see how many people we can bring, because sometimes it really does need all of those voices. And I'll give you a very easy and like really silly example that you won't even think. So like on our period bill, the original language on the bill said feminine hygiene products, right? And when when NOW goes to the primary sponsors and says we want to change that, and we want it, to say menstrual products or period products, and they're like, why? Because they think of NOW as a women's organization, and why would you have a problem, with it being called feminine hygiene? And then we explain to them it's an issue of being more inclusive. But the moment we bring on Garden State Equality as our, sort of partner on that, it changes the dynamic, right? Because all of a sudden, when you have an equality organization, the number one organization for LGBTQ in the state, the lens that they bring to that same bill is clearly understood right away, right? They don't even have to like say anything, right? And that's the power of our coalition, I think. And it really doesn't, it's not about distance. It's not, we live in a technology, like a world that's filled with technology and all kinds of tools. And now I know we're doing a lot of like Zoom and face calls or whatever, but a lot of times like those coalition buildings were done through emails and, text messages. It's just a matter of communication, right? So I really think that kind of coalition building, especially to get things moving sometimes, are really, really super important. Kalika?
Thank you. Can I answer the question, I guess, the way she worded it directly, and then I'll talk about coalition building?
Sure.
So she said, do you find that various groups work well in coalition, or that the work in a state so large is fractured? Well, California is often called a universe of its own. So we're a very, very progressive state where it's really, really hard to get things done if you're, I guess you'd say, more conservative. But there are redder areas or purple areas in California. And because of that, we don't see, it's often criticized for not seeing, I guess, some of of the more fractured issues across the state. But I'd like to put out there that I don't agree with it. A lot of people believe that as long as you have a D on your name, you're safe in California. No, you're not, and we will see right through it. It's one thing to be a Democrat or be a liberal, and then to be a progressive is another thing. And having intersectional criteria and an intersectional framework to your work is how we kind of build coalitions. So the way in which we approach the work is key, because they don't all agree. They're not all from California. They all think the same. In fact, there's a lot of deep infighting. How we build coalitions. Well, first, let me say that we have no permanent friends. We have permanent interests. And so we are committed to intersectionality. And so that's how we build. And also using a reproductive justice framework. So a couple of our coalitions are just lockstep in line with what we need to do. We kind of start from there, and then start from the end, and kind of bring in from those groups that are outer. And I loved what Angeli said. When certain groups are added to the table, the lens that they bring to it automatically highlights issues that haven't been, I guess you'd say, haven't been thought about, and they do need to go back and be revised. We do need all eyes kind of looking at any legislation split through and why, and really taking those concerns into account. And sometimes, you have to wait and make sure that you have it a really tight and strong bill that we can bring upon the most around on intersectional bills. So I'd say that the coalitions work very, very, very well in California, but the work that it took to get there is probably the most difficult part. So the California Coalition on Reproductive Freedom in California, excellent organization. Dream Builders Alliance, the vetting that goes into being a part of that coalition is amazing and outstanding. So that's how we get there. We get there through shared goals and shared values.
Hell yeah. I just want to say that to everything you've both been saying this whole time. And I also recognize that it is now 5:02. And so we could talk forever. We do talk all the time. And if you want to talk with us more, then you should become a now member if you're not already. Reach out to your local chapter to find out how you can be even more engaged if you are fired up now, because you know that there's a lot of work to do. And we are organizing feminists across the country all year to get the Cheeto in Chief out through our multi-issue, multi-strategy agenda. So thank you, Anjali and Kalika, so much for taking the time, East Coast time, West Coast time. It's happy hour time. It's feminist happy hour time. It's Friday. And I'm so grateful to be in community and movement building work with both of you. And so thank you everyone also for watching, and I hope you have a fabulous weekend.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us. Let's dance it out.
Oh, by the way, I'm wearing a Now shirt. I forgot to show it off earlier. Rebecca had her Now mug. I see some ERA swag on you. There we go.
Well, here you go.
Awesome. Yep, there we go. You can move around just easily on your. I need one of those. We are working on the Now swag, friends. I promise we'll get it to you sometime.
A good day. Bye-bye.